Dave Riley. I am with Marion County News, and I evidently didn't test the audio with that monitor. Tonight we've got some of the candidates for the U.S. House 4th District for the state of Tennessee. I've got Clyde Benson here in our number 1 spot. I got Mike Whitten in our number 2 spot. I've got Wayne Steele in our number 3 spot. Appreciate y'all coming out. Real broadly, we're going to be asking 30-second questions. Each candidate has 2 minutes to answer each question. I will be the bad guy, telling everybody if they're going over time, so you may hear my voice a little bit. I do want to thank Ms. Beth Duggar and Mr. Stephen Strain for being our moderators for tonight's Q&A. I do not know what they are going to ask. I did not ask them to ask any questions because I wanted it to be organic. So with that, I'm going to we selected before we went live the order in which this was going to go. So I'm going to open our opening statements in the order that you see them.
My name is Clyde Jensen. Can you hear me? My name is Clyde Jensen. I'm one of your candidates from Houghton, Tennessee to represent the 4th District. I'm a 12-year Army veteran, and I look forward to being your next representative for the 4th Congressional District.
There's some numbers that I want to share this evening. One is 18%. That's the existing approval rating for our seated legislation at this time. There's not a person in the audience this evening, either in the auditorium or at home. If you performed at 18% at your job, you would be fired. The other number I want to share with you is $31 trillion of debt that our seated representatives and Senate have created and left us in a shape that we'll never be able to help our children or grandchildren make America better tomorrow than it is today. We've got some serious problems, and America has to face those problems, and you need responsible people to serve you in the seat that's up for this election in November. Folks, there's 2 ways to be fooled. One is you can believe a lie. The second is you cannot believe the truth. And we see that time and time again throughout the legislation. They say one thing and they mean another. Folks, it's time that we get serious. America, this midterm is so important that you make the right decision and you send the person that's going to stand firm and vote no when they want to increase our debt. Vote no when they want to open the borders more. Vote no when they want to spend money we don't have. And let's stop the waste that's eroding America today. I'm running as an independent, and I've chose to do that because of the division that party politics has created, such hate and anger. I've met thousands and thousands of people over the 15 counties, and everyone agrees it's the same problem. We need to have someone to stand in the aisle, not reach across the aisle, and represent all, we the people of the United States, and particularly here in the 4th District of Tennessee. I'm Mike Whitten, and I am that candidate, and I appreciate the Marion County News and Jasper Miller for opening their doors this evening for us to have an opportunity. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Wayne Steele from Fayetteville, Tennessee, 7th generation Tennessean, sole proprietor, self-employed for 12 years. My background is in healthcare as a massage therapist and as of late a COVID-19 contact tracer for the state, contractor for the state. I stand before you today in a time of crisis, both mentally and spiritually. We are tearing each other apart in this country, and we don't have respect for each other anymore. Since I ran in the primary with my opponent from the start in March, I've said that I would not tolerate any nasty talk about my opponents or about any other politician. and I stand on that principle now. Yeah, I guess that's it for now.
All right, moderators, if you'd like to pose the first question to Mr. Benson, please.
Okay. Why do you feel that you are the most qualified candidate running for Congress?
Right now, I think that we have all three of us up here, as well as other people running. We all have our own reasons. Feel like we're underrepresented at the moment, but we also believe that we can provide something that others can't. My personal opinion is for myself is after serving my country for 12 years in the Army, I fought on the battlefield, and I'm ready to fight on the Senate floor, on the House floor as well.
With 35 years of business experience, being a native Tennessean, knowing and realizing the needs of the people in this area, also working in the real estate market. We're an agricultural state, and we need to have somewhere a stopgap to just protect that. We're seeing a lot of new developments and farms being sold off. It's harder and harder for our farmers to find land to farm. And we need to have something and someone that will stand firm and do that. Making tough decisions comes with owning and operating a business and being successful at it for 35 years. You don't stay in business that long if you're not doing something right. And we need that firmness, as I speak about again. We need to know that when you send someone to Washington, that they're going to represent you completely. Not in any special lobbyist, not in any party that may caucus to have you to vote. We don't need a rubber stamp in Washington. We need a representative in Washington, and I am the man to do it. Thank you.
Like I said before, I'm also been a self-employed sole proprietor for about 12 years. I think that we need somebody in Washington that knows whenever a lobbyist or another politician is trying to pull the wool over our eyes. I think the experience that I come with that is, and a lot of people joke about being a massage therapist, but in that retrospect, or in that perspective, you work with a lot of people who are from different backgrounds, racial, socioeconomic, and all that. I grew up poor. I know what it's like to be on food stamps. I know what it's like to struggle through college, eating at the Catholic Church because you don't have any food. And then to go to being a sole proprietor where I have dealt with multi-million-dollar, singers in Nashville and, hauling around my massage table into their multi-million-dollar homes. I just know when somebody's trying to get over on me, it doesn't matter if you're poor or you're rich. And we really need somebody who understands that, because there's too many rich people in Washington.
We live in a deeply polarized society, and what steps would you all take to work with representatives and persons who have different policy ideas and objectives and concerns, basically reaching across the aisle, so to speak?
As mentioning in my opening statements, one of the reasons I chose to run as an independent is I saw that same polarization. I see it in the workplace, I see it in families, I see it even in churches. And, we're one nation under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all. And when we go to Washington to represent you, we have to be able to earn the trust of those other representatives and be able to work and negotiate. And sometimes that means compromise. I've been married for a long time, and I promise you, if I didn't compromise every once in a while, I'd have heck to pay. And so as we try to do the business of running this country and making it better, The first thing we want to do is, I know everyone in this audience and at home would agree that if we could get rid of the waste, just the waste itself, we could start on a new path to creating a lower deficit. We look at the Fed right now, and they're wanting to slow the market. Well, folks, there's nothing wrong with that, but what about let's speed the other side up and not slow the other? Everyone here is hurting economically. We're supposed to be in a really good economy, but I promise you, everybody I speak to, they're just having a hard time. Gas prices are high. You know, it costs more to get anything, a gallon of milk or a loaf of bread at the store. And if we speed the economy up, if we reduce some tax and get rid of some capital gains tax, people will start spending more money and our economy will flourish from that.
Well, when it comes to reaching across the aisle, I think I have to point out the elephant in the room, and that's that Desjardins is not here. And for the last 12 years, Desjardins has never reached across the aisle. He's a puppet for the Republican Party. He does exactly what they tell him to do and vote for what they tell him to do. And so many Republicans around here just don't feel like they have representation in Washington for their views. And I'm a moderate Democrat, so we're not going to agree on everything. But he's not willing to listen. He doesn't show up. One example I would say that I would reach across the aisle is that I'm very firm on the need for mandatory medical cannabis in all 50 states and all the territories. There's a lady from South Carolina who's a Republican who has brought a bill forward taxing cannabis. I would go as far as to take part of that tax and pay down the debt, because I too am concerned about the $31 trillion in debt. Yeah, I think we just need to reach across the aisle and talk to people who are even, you know, the extreme opposite of what we stand for. We will find common ground in some topic somewhere or another.
Well, our current government is too busy finding amongst themselves rather than trying to work with the American people. As a representative, I can work with others regardless of party politics. I think it's time we have someone in Congress that can reach across the aisle. As we said, we're not going to agree on everything, but there are things that we can agree on. We can reach compromise. I once heard someone say that if you compromise, you lose. I completely disagree with that. Sometimes compromise is necessary, and I believe that you have to be able to do that in order to reach your goals and serve the American people.
What would you specifically do to improve the lives of everyday working people in Tennessee?
Well, two things that I would say that I would work on in improving people's lives in rural Tennessee, and especially in our district, is that there's been millions of dollars that's been allocated for rural internet, and you don't see Desjardins holding the people's feet to the fire around here about actually implementing it, putting it in the ground. I actually have people who are friends who are the diggers who put the fiber optics in the ground, and they go and take jobs in Dallas or Indianapolis or places like that, because there's quote not jobs around here to do that, and there should be, because there's millions of dollars been allocated by the state and also by the infrastructure package. I think that rural broadband would expand jobs, especially for single parents who have maybe limited means or type of transportation that's not reliable. They could work from home. They wouldn't have to drive into Chattanooga. They wouldn't have to drive into Nashville, or they could work for some other company on the other side of the country. I think the other thing is that to help farmers, and thinking about it from a public health standpoint, to improve people's access to healthier foods, We need to allow farmers, if they choose, to take EFT, not EFT, sorry, EBT food stamps. That way people can have access to produce in their local areas, and that would create competition for the big box stores, and that would improve their health and their life.
As someone who's worked also factories for a better part of 25 years, I consider myself a person of the people, and I understand what the average everyday American goes through, whether it's Tennessee, California, wherever. We all have some of the same issues. And one thing that I've got a plan for, at least to introduce once I get there, is a tax reform that would eliminate, or at least reduce the amount of taxes that you pay after a 40-hour work week. Because working in factories especially, I know firsthand, it doesn't leave a lot of time for a life work balance. Sometimes you're working 60, 70 hours a week or more, and you can't have a work-life balance of that. And no amount of money can replace the time you spend with your children, your family, your friends. But at least having a little bit more of a cushion, having reduced taxes on that would help out a lot. And also we need to look at our healthcare system. Right now our healthcare system is broken. We don't have the mental health care that we need, and right now we see that every day as more and more people are going for psychiatric care that aren't getting it. People are going to the hospital and not being able to get the care that they need, or if they do get any care, it's limited. And our healthcare workers are hurting. We're very understaffed. We need to work on that to help the American people.
Education has proven over decades that it's the key to growth, it's the key to expansion, it's the key to a better life. I'm a product of public school systems here in Tennessee, and I could almost memorize and tell you the names of every educator I had because they impacted me. And so education is going to be the key, but during the education, we set our standard that we're trying to get kids to go to a 2-year school and get an associate degree. We need to set our standards that these kids want to go and be a scientist and a researcher and a developer. Just a short while ago, our nation in the auto industry was struggling to provide product to the lots simply because of one small chip that's made in China. Folks, with the education and the training and the expertise, we could develop those chips right here in Marion County. We could have some of the best paying jobs that these folks have ever seen and bring the technology here that will create those jobs, but not only create the job, but create a lifestyle that those kids and their children want to stay in Marion County and want to stay in the 4th District and live here, because this is a really good place to live. I travel all over the United States and other countries in business, and I promise you, this still is the greatest country in the world. This is the greatest area that you could ever imagine to raise a family and educate your kids. And I just believe that education is the first fundamental to that promise.
Follow up on the education question. What role do you all see the federal government playing in education? And I'll deal specifically with elementary, high school. If you want to address higher education as well, that would be fine.
Our education system right now is subpar at best. I think we need more educators that are willing to go the extra mile to get that first-hand experience with their students. Some students have a harder time learning. We need to address that. We need to work on getting more teachers that actually want to do the job, are there for the right reasons. And right now, as far as our K through 12 schools. We need more people that can get in there and work with the students, work with the other people, and not bring in personal issues to the school system.
The short answer is none, Mr. Strang. Government and politicians don't need to be involved in our school system. I don't know of one representative in the state of Tennessee that has a background in education. We should let our educators, our local school boards, our teachers, and our parents be involved in our education process. Those are the ones that are here. Those are the ones that know our needs, and those are the ones that see how to do that. Our teachers need to be able to teach, our children need to be able to learn, and our communities will flourish just from that simple context. Federal government has no place in education other than to just set the guidelines. This is what we expect, this is what your standard is, and then let the local school boards and the education system and the teachers and the parents do their job. And we believe that by doing that, we'll see a better turnout of education. We'll see more students go for higher education because they're not tested. When you put a child in a room and just to test their evaluation and not teach them, we're leaving those kids behind. We're not helping that child at all. We need to be able to educate that child and let that child learn on his own and not put him in a grade where this is your pass or fail. And some kids don't test well. Some kids don't. But you let a teacher get involved with a student one-on-one, and I promise you they'll learn something every day.
Well, I have a number for the audience as well, and that is $4,000. The state of Tennessee funds per student $4,000 less than the national average. And you have right now a right-leaning pull on the public education system to the point to where even Republican teachers do not like the direction that Bill Lee is taking our state. I think that we need equal access and equal funding across the board, no matter someone's race or socioeconomic background, no matter the school system. I'd go as far as to say that failing schools actually need to be, instead of money being taken away from them, I think they need to be given 150% of what they normally would to have the tools that they need, especially teachers who have to dig in their own pockets just for students. I really like the apprenticeship program that they have set up in Tennessee for school teachers. If they already have a bachelor's degree, the apprenticeship program to become a teacher is free. I do agree that the national standards need to come from the federal government. Otherwise, you're going to have students that are all over the country that are trained at different levels of education. And we really need students who are already trained coming out of high school, a lot of the tech programs in the last 2 years of high school. And lastly, I would say that if I were elected, I would push forward legislation to bar federal money to be used for charter and private schools.
How do you feel about term limits?
Well, there's several jokes about term limits, and it's a serious situation. If we look at the seated legislation today, I don't know that there's anybody there with less than, maybe there's a few with less than 8 years, but I made a promise when I took this campaign on, if the congressional seats are still in 2-year terms, I'm wanting to serve 10 years. I want to serve 5 terms. At that juncture, I'm coming back home. I'm not going to stay on national health care. I'm not going to retire with the same salary that I got when I was working in Congress. If I have a retirement fund, that's what I'm going to live on. If I'm on Social Security, that's what I'm going to live on. And we as a country, we can't produce these lifelong incomes for people. We're supposed to go serve. A statesman's supposed to go serve his community and serve the people. We're not supposed to go for a lifetime of ease and job environment where we don't worry about anything. And lots of time when you talk to people about their jobs, most of our representatives wouldn't even know where to start. They don't even know the old term is too much month at the end of the month. It doesn't affect them. And that's the thing that has to be real. That's the thing that has to stay real to be able to protect and serve the people of Middle Tennessee.
I think everybody that I've talked to since the beginning of this campaign knows how much term limits actually gets under my skin. There may be a few, like Mr. Winton said, that have been there less than 8 years, but most of the time, most of them are in their 80s. And I don't mean that to sound ageist, but I'm told by constituents more so that are over 60 that say that, people should admit when it's time to go home. And there's a lot of them in both parties, it's time to go home. I prefer a 24-year limit if you were going to be in the House, combining that with the Senate. So if you did, 4 terms in the Senate or 12 terms in the House, hopefully I got my math right. I think that there should be term limits from the dog catcher to the vice president. Frankly, it's just learning about campaign finance. I've just learned that it's a big slush fund of ways for them to not have to pay their own bills, essentially, and they get to ride around the country and do whatever they want, just getting reelected, and then they gerrymander themselves so much to where they get to keep their seat, and both sides do it, red state or blue state.
This is actually one of the questions that I get asked most often when I talk to people, and my belief is 12 years, whether it's 6 in the Senate or 6 in the House or 2 terms in the Senate or any combination of the 2. And I also believe that once you announce your candidacy for another office, whether it's higher or lower, you automatically resign from your current position, so you should be able to run for 2 offices at the same time. So term limits are a big thing right now. Like I said, we've got people that's been there way too long. Some people, most of them couldn't even tell you when they first got elected, I don't think. And that's one thing we need to address. We need people in there with new ideas, new beliefs, and it's just one of those things where people get comfortable with one candidate and they vote that candidate. They don't look at us, they don't look at anyone else running. And that's one thing we need to address. We need to take someone out of the equation as a person that's reached their limit. And for me, that is 12 years.
As a state prosecutor, I see the effects of the opioid crisis on basically a daily basis between the overdose deaths and the epidemic we're facing with fentanyl, etc. What role do you see in the federal government, if any, in addressing those issues?
I think that a big part of the problem is the fentanyl coming across the border. I think it's not just Mexico, but it's also Canada as well, coming through China. The federal government needs to, I would almost beg to say that every car coming across the border needs to be checked for drugs. I'm not sure of the outlet that I saw this from, but I'd actually heard that some of the people bringing the drugs across the border are actually Americans, because Americans are less likely to get stopped than foreigners. How much of that is true, I don't know. That would be a far easier way to get fentanyl across the border. I think that the expansion of mental health, even to the uninsured, rehab programs that are not just in and out 7 days. It takes far longer than that to come off a drug. I think that there needs to be more funding too for safe ways of using for people who are coming off of it, and for the stigma to be lowered based upon talking about it more.
The federal government's main role should be reducing the amount that's coming over. By doing that, we need to protect our borders, we need to protect our people. When it comes to actually tackling the crisis, we need to do that from communities, and because it takes a community to address the issue, find out what's going on in that area. Not all areas are the same. So for the government, build the wall bigger than we could ever imagine. We gotta look at people coming across and take care of our communities. Then when we get to the smaller levels of communities, we need people, we need education. They will tell, whether a drug is real or whether it's fake. And we do that by looking at, we've got a lot of people in these communities that are in recovery right now that love helping people. There's no better person to talk to someone about addiction than someone that's been there. And we need to empower these people to get out there and tell their stories, and I think that would help a lot.
Opioid is a deadly crisis that we face here in our area, and I know other parts of the country. As far as in your job, Mr. Strain, I would ask that we be tougher on these pill mills. We be tougher on these people that are abusing their powers of doctor to write prescriptions for favor and gain. We'd be tougher on the manufacturer to reduce that and not issue those drugs just at a free, open prescription when you walk in a doctor's office. The second thing I think could help us tremendously is our state legislators had an opportunity to expand health care in the state of Tennessee. We lost 10 hospitals, and we've had 300-something thousand people uninsured. The money was already there. What happened to that money? It got sent to other states, just so you know. We didn't get to take advantage of any of that. It's still a viable process. But when you have someone that doesn't have the health care they need, they can't do preventative health care. And so what do? They go to an ER. That's the only way they can get in. They get a prescription because their shoulder or their back's hurting, and they're addicted to these drugs. We need to be tough on that. We need to put a stop to it. The fentanyl issue at the border is a deep concern, and we need to shut that down immediately. There's no reason. And let's make the Mexican government be involved with this same step. Not just American, but the Mexican Border Patrol can protect us just as much as the U.S. Border Patrol. And we need to work together to stop that before it harms more people.
How do you feel about climate change?
My personal thought is the climate's changed off and on in the world for thousands of years. It's for 100,000 years, billions of years, it's changed thousands of times. So whether I do believe that there are changes, but it's something that's natural. And we need to look at that from scientific perspective. There have been many climatologists, researchers, and that will tell you that it's happened by any times, that's just something natural happens in our world. I don't think it's anything that's going to destroy the world. Otherwise, it would have happened 1,000 times over.
Scientists tell us that it's real. I've lived a good life and I've seen a lot of changes in my life, but it's still hot in the sun and cold in the winter. Without question, fossil fuels are depleting its supply just from simple use, and then also the harmful effect that it has in the ozones are something we can address. I think in the auto industry alone, if you look from 1960s and today, the emissions on a car are so much less than they were back that many years ago, 50 years ago. And so there's a lot of steps. There's a lot of steps even in the diesel with the different products that they use for that today. You see more and more trucks on the road. And the more we use the fossil fuels, the more we're going to have that emissions. And I'm not a scientist. I can't speak on that, and I just would leave that to them. But I would like to have really good, solid information. I don't want to listen to 10 different newscasts and have 10 different guests and have 10 different stories. The American people deserve the truth, whether it be in climate change or whether it be in COVID, or whether it be in a national disaster, or whether what's going on in Washington is the truth or not. We need the truth. We don't need to be left out and just evaporated into nothing and not be a part of this equation. We really need someone that will let us know exactly what's going on.
I do believe, obviously, in the science that we go through cyclical patterns of climate change, but I think that whenever you look at the science behind the Industrial Revolution until now and how we've used fossil fuels in an increasing manner, and even it can't just be the United States, though, that improves our emissions, because China and India are the two largest countries in the world, and they have far more cars now than we do. The emissions need to continue to be improved, and I would say that we have to not be so fearful of electric cars or hybrids or anything like that. I'm actually kind of a nerdy guy when it comes to electric cars, and there's actually some that have more torque and horsepower than gasoline. You need to look that up because it's actually true. I'm the only representative or the only candidate who would introduce a bill for an environmental corps. I believe it needs to be something like the Peace Corps, or like going in the military where you serve for 4 years and your explicit job is to clean up the pollution that is in our waterways, and especially in our international waters with all the plastics that are floating around. I think that climate change is also affecting our health, because you have, plastics that are that mimic hormones that are affecting our waterways, and also the water treatment plants can't filter all of that out.
Should the United States continue to support the Ukrainians in their war against Russia with materials and ammunition, weapons, etc.? Not troops, just support in the form of weapons, etc.
There's mixed emotions about that. You never want to see freedom ran over or done away with. And Ukraine is not a part of NATO, and Russia has invaded its country. We as a country have helped them tremendously. One of the questions I have is, why haven't we bartered? If we're going to help that country, they have product and minerals and things that our country needs to survive. They're big producers in that. And just to give someone a handout is not the right way to do it. If we want to give a hand up, and do some trading with the country of Ukraine, I see that as a positive, because then we're actually helping our country and not just spending the monies that we already don't have. We're not just giving them things that shouldn't be in the hands of other people that aren't going to be in step with us and protect us and help us supply the needs we have when that time comes due.
I think we need to go back to somebody that would be considered my adoptive grandfather, who owned a farm next to me when I was growing up, and go back and speak to him when he was about 17, 18 years old. We were doves. Both parties were doves in the United States when it came to Nazis and German occupation walking westward across the European continent. I consider myself a hawk on this, even though I'm a Democrat. He didn't voluntarily go to Germany and have both legs taken and laid into German soil and laid there to rot, and him live in the United States until he was 72 years old, to have 80 years later another dictator trying to walk across the European peninsula. I think if you go back and ask him if he thinks that before Pearl Harbor was hit, if giving aid to France or the UK or Italy, or actually they were part of it as well, but any of those Western countries in Europe, if we helped them, whether Americans back then would have, in retrospect, see that as a handout.
Whether or not to help Ukraine, continue to help Ukraine, is a double-edged sword. Regardless of which way you go, it can go either way. If we help them, it's seen as an act of war. If we don't, it's seen as an act of weakness. And right now, we really can't afford to do both after spending over 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan, and then everything going on right now with the possibility of things going on between China and Taiwan, North Korea. We can't afford to show weakness, but at the same time, we can't afford to go into another war. So I would support continuing to aid them as far as weapons, or giving them training, bringing some of their soldiers over here to train, but we just simply can't get involved in another war. But there are other ways that we can help, and that is by helping with training, supplies, whatever they need. As far as the invasion itself, the United States has already tried to put restrictions on Russia, and we've seen that's got us nowhere. So the only thing we could do, the best thing we could do as far as that goes, is to completely shut Russia off from the rest of the world. And we do that by empowering NATO even more than what we already have.
Do you support raising the minimum wage, and if so, what would you feel like would be fair? If not, what do you believe a livable wage is?
I'm torn with that because I see that people can say that causes inflation. You know, I went through the period of time between whenever it went from roughly $5.15 to $7.25, and we really didn't see all that much inflation. I've kind of thrown it around to constituents of maybe having a $15 minimum wage in a metro area and staggering that down between suburban and rural. And I had a lot of rural pushback that said we have similar cost of living, and it's different because we travel more than people in urban centers do, and it should be flat across the board. I'm still just in favor of a $15 minimum wage. The funny thing is if you ask any congressman or senator what the actual federal minimum wage is, they really don't know. They don't know what it takes to live on. I don't think that $15 is even a livable wage. If you look at the job market right now, you would be hard pressed to find any job under $18 an hour. So yeah, $15 would be my limit.
I'll be in favor of raising it to at least $9 an hour, but no more than 10. And then each area has its own options whether to make raise even more. I've seen areas that, even right now, that have a minimum wage of $12 an hour. And that's the one thing that we can look at. The federal minimum wage is the minimum period across the board. And each area has their own, can raise it to whatever they feel is the minimum wage that would provide decent living for someone in that area. So, yeah, I'm in favor of raising it, and I think it's way overdue.
I honestly believe that the minimum wage, if you look at today's market, I get calls, I work in real estate, and I get calls every day, someone looking for a home to rent. And I know in your area, my area over in Coffee County, average home's bringing $800 a month. If you work for $10 an hour, that's $400 a week before taxes. 2 of your paychecks just went to rent. I don't know of a company in Tullahoma that's hiring right now that's paying any less than $10 an hour on their own, and it's just simple economics because people won't work if they can't live. And so the marketplace itself, if we government, we need smaller government. We don't need more interaction with government. We need to let states and we need to let businesses and individuals negotiate their own incomes and their own cost of livings. And so as we do that, it frees up the market. So you're not looking again for the government. We have to quit this handout crap. We can't stand any more handouts. We can do the hand-ups, and everybody survives. Everybody makes it. Everybody pays it forward. But when you talk about creating a government that says this is the minimum that you can work for, that's wrong. Government doesn't need to be involved in that. The negotiators, the business owners, and the employees need to be able to negotiate that. And anybody that has a good employee, they want them to be able to live on the wage they give them. They don't want them to have to call in because they don't have a place to live or living out of their car. And that's just, that's the way it is, and that's the way it needs to be. We need to let government get out of the business of conducting that kind of stuff.
Several states have legalized marijuana. Would you support a federal legalization of marijuana as it is now illegal under federal law?
Yes, I would, under the condition that it carries the same penalties as alcohol use, things like that, which of course it does, but too many people would get the wrong idea if you federally made it federally legal. I'm afraid too many people would actually abuse it. So I think we'd have to put those same restrictions out there that, as it is, you have to say it, that it would carry the same consequences, same restrictions as alcohol or any other drug. That just because it's legal doesn't mean that it's legal for everyday use. There has to be, restrictions as far as driving, operating machinery, like that. And like I said, as sad as it is, you actually have to say those things. But yes, I would support legalization of marijuana nationwide.
This is hard for me to say, but no, I would not support legalizing marijuana. We already had a discussion about opioids. We already had a discussion about fentanyl. We already had discussions about harmful drugs that cause problems. And, we can use the product of cannabis and treat some of these forms of medications versus legalizing marijuana. There's proven fact, if you look in the states where marijuana is legal, if you drive to Portland, Oregon tomorrow and drive downtown Portland, Oregon, you'll see nothing but homeless people. You drive into any state in Colorado and you'll see nothing but homeless people. And those both states have legalized marijuana. What the problem would be is just like we have in opioids. If let's say I get a prescription for marijuana and Wayne wants to buy some of it and he doesn't have a prescription, guess who's going to sell it to him? And it's uncontrolled, it's unchecked, and it's just going to create problems. It's going to create problems in the home, it's going to create problems in the workplace, and it's going to create problems in our communities. Folks, we've got enough problems. We don't need to create more problems. We need to stop problems.
I am actually for decriminalization at the federal level and mandatory medical prescription in all 50 states and all the territories. There are numerous studies for PTSD and anxiety, depression, ADHD that prove that the use of medical cannabis actually works. If you don't decriminalize it, then you can't regulate it. There's too many people who have been put in prison, and it really comes down to controlling people's voting rights. Whenever you give them a felony because they had a seed of marijuana in their car, then they lose their right to vote for their life. If the person has no other crime that's related to children or violent crime or other drugs, then I think their record should be expunged and their voting rights returned to them. I think that on a recreational use, it should be left up to states' rights. I know that you give the example of Portland and Colorado, but actually the red state of Oklahoma has medical cannabis, and so does Arizona. I know Arizona's homeless population is a little higher, but when it comes to Oklahoma, I would think that, from what I've seen, their homeless population is much lower per capita. Maybe they have better homeless shelters, I'm not sure. But we've got to get out of the business of big government telling us what herb we can use as medicine.
Well, this is a segue. My next question was going to be about homeless people. I know if you go to Nashville, it's amazing how many people are living under bridges, and Chattanooga has got a huge homeless population. Even rural cities do. So what would you do specifically to help that problem?
You know, it's a hard answer. It's a hard question, and it's hard to look at those folks. You know, we have discussions in my Sunday school class periodically about, you know, there's always this guy at Walmart and his wife, and they're holding up a sign, you know, please help. And then I think about, and we've again had these discussions, and I think about all the locations in town that are looking to hire, and nobody's applying for a job. Now, you know, I don't want to sound crude, I don't want to sound mean, but if those folks are homeless, why don't we go and supply them with an application of people that are hiring in that position and transfer them from a homeless shelter into a working environment with a good job and some benefits, and maybe get them in some housing to start and let them continue to grow, to work themselves out. Some of this stuff is generational. Some of this stuff transfers. I work in the schools at a mentoring program, and I tell this sad story. I was sitting across the table from a young man, and I said, well, what are you going to do when you graduate? And he looked at me and he said, I'm going to draw. And I'm like, really? I said, you're going to be an architect or an artist? And he said, no, sir. I said, I'm going to draw. And I'm like, what does that mean? He said, my mother and my father draw a check, and I'm going to draw. We are responsible as a nation, as a state, as a county. We are responsible. We need to stand up and do the right things, but we need to lead in a direction to get them out of that generational curse. We don't need to add to it and condone it. We need to work to defuse that situation in America today.
I definitely think it's a multi-pronged approach. There's no simple answer. I initially started college in Nashville roughly 20 years ago, and where I lived at in South Nashville, anywhere I drove around Nashville, I didn't see any homeless people. If I did, it was the people who were selling the little magazine or newspapers there when you get on the interstate. And today, it's partially due to a housing crisis. No offense to anybody that lives in the district. We have a lot of infiltration of Californians who are selling their houses and coming by 3 properties over here. And that's spilled over all the way down into my town of Fayetteville, where we can't assume that people are homeless or going homeless, don't have jobs, or they aren't doing what they should. One works at a factory and the other one has a job, and because the landlord decided that they can remodel the trailer that they live in, they kicked them out in the meantime. So they have no place to go. And I'm not sure about housing in Tullahoma, but you're talking about houses that go for $1,300 a month, trailers, 40-year-old trailers that have just been remodeled going for $800 to $1,100 a month. And so if we don't solve the problem of helping people with mental health and also building stronger homeless centers that are where you can actually get the mental health and health care that you need, so that you can actually, if you don't have a strong mind and body, you're never going to hold a job. Assisting them with where they can live, and also helping them get to training to where they can then get a job and live on their own autonomously.
Excuse me, I'm just going to announce this will be our final question before closing statements.
I've always heard that tough times don't last, but tough people do. And I think that's something that we need to take into account. I think right now we have too many people that give up too easy and always looking for a handout. So I believe in, as Mr. Williams said earlier, we can give hand-ups, but not handouts. And we need a stronger area, stronger community, like I said earlier. Community is the basis of any kind of foundation, success of the area. And you need people to work together. And you can't do that whenever, walking down the street or driving down the street, all you see is homeless people or people wanting help. I'm not saying don't help them, but at the same time, we can't give them a reason to stay in that state. So I would support finding some sort of help for them as far as finding a place to stay, whether it's on a temporary basis or something they do for a while, they get back on their feet. No one should go homeless. No one should be out in the cold. But at the same time, we can't keep condoning the behavior like it's normal, because it's not. I don't think anyone wants to be homeless, but you can't get in that mindset that that's the only thing you can do is ask for help. Like I said earlier, we got too many businesses that are hiring, but no one wants to go there. Nobody wants to work for $7.25 an hour, but it's better than nothing. And on that $7.25 an hour, you can get housing assistance, things like that. And they don't look at that; they give up. So we need to look at that as an opportunity to empower them and help them get back on their feet.
With my apologies, I lost track of where we were. Mr. Strain, I believe, will have the final question, and that'll give each candidate the first answer 3 times. So, Mr. Strain, if you could ask one final question.
Thank you. There's been a lot of talk tonight about budget and budget deficit. How would you go about balancing the federal deficit?
Like I've said before about the medical cannabis, I would introduce legislation that would, there would be a 5% tax on all sales of cannabis across the board in all the states. 3% of that would go strictly to paying down the debt, 1% to mental health and 1% to health care, or 1% to mental health and 1% to education. And I am for a balanced budget amendment. If you have $30 trillion in debt and you take in less revenue than what you actually pay out each year, and then you try to go get a loan, you're going to get turned down because you're underwater. I just believe that the states have to abide by a balanced budget, and we should write it in the Constitution that all budgets from the federal government should be balanced. Is there a different part of the question? Was that it?
I personally like Senator Rand Paul's approach of reducing certain areas by 1% every year for the next 5 years, and it will, over the next 5 years, it will create a balanced budget. And by doing that, you look at all the different sectors that we fund money to. A lot of things you can reduce money to, other things you want to give a little bit more to. So let's say, for instance, one of the things that we can reduce money from is the National Science Foundation. I can't remember the exact name of it, but they get millions of dollars every year and spend it frivolously on tests that have nothing to do with helping American people in any way whatsoever. So I think we can look at that and decrease funding from there and put it toward our education system, but not to the point where it overhauls what we currently have. You can't, as Mr. Steele said, you can't spend more money than what you have. And that's what our government keeps doing. If I go to my boss and say I need a raise whenever I need extra money, and I got to tell him this is what I need, and he had to abide by it, then that would be a problem. I probably wouldn't have a job. But that's what our government is doing right now. They say they need more money and they vote on it, and that's not the way it should work. Whether to raise federal spending should be decided by the American people, but if the government can agree to reduce it, then that's something to do on their own.
The United States hadn't seen a balanced budget since, I believe, Bill Clinton was president. And how that worked wasn't because Bill Clinton was president, and it wasn't because we had a certain Speaker of the House. It was because both sides of the aisle came together in a nonpartisan effort and agreed that that was the goal that we had. So the first step, and people have asked me, what's the first thing you're going to do? Well, first of all, I'm going to hire one of the best staffs that you've ever seen, and these folks are going to be hard workers. We're going to find the waste that's involved in our deficit today, and we're going to try to eliminate that. And we do that by gaining respect throughout the corridors of the legislative body. And once we let the American people see that this works, they're going to demand their representatives do it in turn. We can't have bills that will not stand on their own. America cannot afford to have all the pork. If you had a bill come before the House and these seats were filled with 400 and something legislators, each one of them wants to be a part of it. Well, guess what happens? We, the people, lose because each one of them want their little specific part to be involved, and that's what creates this. We need to create an environment where these people are working together for the good of the people and for the good of the country, not for the good of their pockets or for the good of their lobbyists or for the good of their donors. I was told when I took on this campaign, if you want to be taken serious, You're gonna need to have $450,000 and raise that kind of money. And I said, no, I don't. I need 150,000 votes. And that's what I'm asking for you in November. Get me 150,000 votes, and I'll be elected your next congressman, and I'll serve you, we the people.
All right, Mr. Benson, if you'll start us off with closing comments.
So we've seen here, we've got 3 candidates with a few opposing views, and I believe we can all bring something to the table that we currently don't have. But why you should choose me is because, as I said, I fought for this country for 12 years in the United States Army. I'm not done fighting yet. I believe that we can still save our country, regardless of how far down we've gone. And we just need more people in there that are willing to put in the effort. Right now, we don't have that. You have several people that have been there for 2-3 years, that 2 to 4 years, that everybody knows their name. Whether it's Congresswoman Lauren Boebert from Colorado, you mention her name, everybody knows who she is. AOC from New York, mention her name, everybody knows who she is. And you say that about a lot. You mentioned Congressman Scott Desjardins outside of this area, or even in this area, nobody has a clue who you're talking about. So we need somebody that's going to get out there on the front lines, that's going to fight, and I will do that as your representative.
46%. That's what we rank in the United States in voter turnout. We're ranked number 46 out of 50 states. That means there's only 4 that votes less people than we do. I remember a time where I grew up, you would drive to a box, an old gray box, and take out a piece of paper, and you would vote for a candidate. You would vote for the person you felt was best suited to lead you in that direction. I, again, talked to thousands of people as I've traveled all over these 15 counties, and when you talk to them, they're frustrated, they're angry, and they don't trust, and they feel like that it doesn't make a difference. How many times have you seen in a state race or a U.S. federal race, the numbers are always the same? So-and-so voted for a letter, they didn't vote for a person. So-and-so voted for this because so-and-so asked. They didn't vote for that person because they were qualified, or there would have been a change of arms. We heard 2 years ago that somebody was going to drain the swamp. Well, the problem is you can't drain a swamp if you don't get rid of the gators, okay? And the gators are still there. I'm asking for your vote in November. I'm asking you send me to Congress, because I'm not going to just serve you in Washington. I'm going to serve you here in Marion County. You're going to see me at your football games. You're going to see me at your graduation. You're going to see me at the death of a family member if I'm available to be there for you, because that's what representation is. It's not going and living on a high hog, and it's not sitting at your home and not showing up at a debate that's important. By golly, he should be here, and I'm calling him out for it. If you're going to serve the people, come serve the people. Thank you.
I guess I will leave you with the story of Teddy Roosevelt that is told time and time again, and that is the guy who gets in the arena. It's easy to point the finger at the person who isn't in the arena. Or if you're outside the arena, it's easy to point to the guy who's inside. I've been that guy inside the arena my whole entire life. I'm a survivor of PTSD. I know the failings of our mental health system. And I'm always that guy who gets back up and continues to fight. No matter how bloodied or toiled or battered and bruised, I get up every time. And I will say that Desjardins is actually known outside the district for a really terrible reason. And that's a reason that we did not talk about tonight. And that is the number of times he's paid for an abortion. I live by the principles that have grounded me my entire life. I am not going to vote on something that I turn around and did in my past and then think it's okay for people to have to go hundreds of miles to seek health care that they need. That's tough decisions that are private decisions. Desjardins votes every time for the institution of a state religion. He thinks that we need to be Christians. He wants to force that upon us. We see that time and time again with his vote on contraception, his vote on women's health care, and we need the government out of our personal lives, of women's health care choices, who we marry, what contraception we use. And I would say that more Republican women are silent than what you know. So I ask for your vote. Go to steeleforcongress.us, STEELE, 4, congress.us. Thanks.
All righty. Well, that concludes our Q&A for this evening. And you're going to hear timeout as I come through with the microphone one more time, because I won't make the same mistake again. Want to thank the candidates that showed up. Genuinely appreciate you coming out, Marion County voters. A little bit about you. For those that question whether or not they are registered to vote, November 8th is the election day. You have until October 8th to make sure that you are registered. Sometimes pronounced the 11th.
That's 30 days before
Uh-huh.
the election.
I know October 8th is safe. We'll double check that. But point being, you still have time to make sure that you're registered. Early voting starts on October 19th here in Marion County. That's Monday through Thursday, 8 to 4 p.m. Fridays are 8 to 6 p.m. Saturdays are 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. And that goes from the 19th through November 3rd, I believe. So again, really appreciate our candidates, our moderators, Beth Duggar and Steve Strain. Thank you very much. And for now, please go out and vote.
It is October 11th.
By the way, I would add, that's prosecuted in the area, they pretty much, that's no longer really our issue. Well, but you don't see people going out of state with, it's that part of it. Nice to meet you. You don't lack business.
ask it. And, the only catch is, I really want to know what you think of that basket, because I got a pretty limited number of them. I wasn't sure I trusted the quality of it, but it flattens out. I've been using one, so, but that is a tiny.
It seems like it would hold pretty good weight too. It's
I gotta be honest, this was a little more rigid than I thought it was gonna be.
I think the rigid is good.
Yeah, oh, I do.
You can hold some weight, yes.
Put some ice in there.
Thank
But,
you.
well, thank you. We really appreciate it. But, whatever the easiest egress is for you.
I didn't know man, I'm gonna be a moderator when I grow up.
They didn't tell me this part.
Yeah, they don't think that was a bribe if we give it to you, you know?
You didn't wanna give it to you early, right?
Yeah.
Thank y'all again.
Nice to meet y'all.
Good to see you. Good luck to you.
Thank you. Appreciate y'all's vote.